In this video, we'll be going over the rotate array problem from LeetCode. And to start off, we're going to go ahead and read the problem description, get through examples, and then go through the first four steps of Umpire. So in the example portion, in the description, given an array, rotate the array to the right k steps where k is non-negative. So for the description, I feel like it's kind of weird how it is when you hear rotate array. We're not necessarily rotating it around. We're just taking the first. I guess now that you're rotating, I usually say sliding it over, and I'll show you what I mean in our example. So for our first example, we're going to go through the example that I have here, and then I'm going to give another example to show. And starting for this one is we're going to have we're going to have 3 as k, and we're going to have 4 elements in our array. So what it's saying is this. So how we're actually going to do this is what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the last element and we're going to slide it to the left, and then everything is going to get pushed forward. And we're pretty much looping through this whole list until we are done with k steps. So how do I mean by that? So let's actually do that real quick. So let's say this. I'm gonna do like a live representation of what we're doing as we go for this one. So let's say here for this first example. Uh, boom. So let's say this, right? So we're gonna start off with R1. So I should delete this one. So starting with our first step, right? Our first step, we're taking our 4. So we're rotating it around. We're sliding it over. We're taking our 4. We're gonna go ahead and slide it to our index 0 position. So then our first one is going to look like 4, 1, 2, 3. 4, comma 1, comma 2, comma 3. Yeah. Alright, so that's going to be 1. That's 1 that we've moved. Next, we're going to do it again. This time we're going to move our 3. So instead of 3 here, we're actually going to move 3 over here on the last bit. And that's 2. Now we got one more to go. So I'm going to copy this one. Copy, and what's our last one? Well, we have 2 here, so we're going to remove 2 and add it over here. Oh, there we go, 2. And that's all we're doing, and this right here is going to be our final answer. So then we could just do a little arrows right here, copy this guy right here. There we go. And that's all we're doing. So we're taking an array, we're getting a number of how many times we're doing this whole sliding our last index to the first place, and just doing that over and over and over, k amount of times. So now that we have that out the way, I'll probably do one more example actually. So another example, let's say I want, let's say I have 101, comma 205, comma 690. And because we only have 3, I'm only going to do this maybe, you know what? Let's have k be 4. We're going to move this whole thing 4 times, and let's see how that's going to look. So starting with our first one, we're going to take our first index here. Let me actually just get that instead. So we're taking our our last element. We're taking that and we're sliding it to the right. Okay, that's 1. And then 1, 2. So 205 is going to be over here in our 0 position. 205, and then that part gets deleted. I'm going to skip the brackets. And then we have 101. So 101, comma, 205, comma, 690. Alright, now we're at third part. Now to our fourth part. What's our fourth one going to be? It's going to be, alright, so I'm going to move my 690 first, and then 101, and then 205, because we're sliding it over. And this right here will be our result. Let's paste it here actually. And that is it. That's how we're gonna do it. Now that we have this in our description and got the examples out the way, let's go through the understanding. So for our understanding, what are we taking as an input? Well, there are two things as inputs that we're taking, and that's going to be a list slashed array and an integer. And then our outputs will be our it's gonna be an array. And that's pretty much what we have as an understanding of this, is that we're going to be given two inputs and we're going to output a list. It's going to be the modified list. And now, as I look through the whole steps, there are going to be like two methods that we're going to be using, and those methods are going to be they're going to be pop and insert. And how this works out, while I pull up a second screen to kind of reference it, is let's just put pop insert, and I'll actually explain them each, like what we're doing in a bit. Another thing we're going to be doing is I could see us using a for loop for this, because we're looping k amount of times, so for loops. And I think that's it. Yeah. It's not one, it's medium on LeetCode, but it's actually going to be very, very simple. Almost as simple as FizzBuzz. Not FizzBuzz probably has more steps, but Intuit is going to be our planning portion. So on our planning, of course, we're going to go ahead and take inputs, array, and int. And then what's going to end up happening is, now we're going to have a for loop. So for loop, and we're going to have a range actually of 0 through k. That part kind of explain in a bit. And then our next part that we're going to be doing is, while we have our for loop, we're going to have to take the last element of the array. So how are we going to do that? Well, we first need to capture that. So we will just call it temp. Temp number is going to equal, a little bit of pseudocode here, is going to equal our array, or is going to equal the element popped. So actually, just call it last element for right now. I'll get into the more technical how we're doing that. We're going to use pop for this one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to insert. Oh, it's funny. Insert our element in the first index. And that's going through the whole loop process, and then we're going to end up printing array, or return it. And going through this, I'm actually going to kind of note how we're going to be doing the pop method. So let's go through that real quick. So let's say array.pop. So how we're actually going to be doing this is that what we're doing in the array pop is, what pop is that we're going to take whatever that is, and we're putting the index of it, meaning that we're going to end up using the length we're going to use length for it. And for length, how are we going to know, like based around n amount of elements? Well, we're just going to use length of array. Now, of course, if we have exactly that, it's going to be out of range. It's going to be out of range by 1. So we're going to end up doing -1. And that's how we get it. Our last, not only our last number at every cycle, but our temporary number that we're going to insert. And so speaking of the insert, so what's insert? So the way we would do it is going to be array.insert and where we're going to be placed, it takes in 2 parameters. And the first one is going to be our place, the place for it. So we're going to say 0. And what is it that we're putting in there? Well, it's going to be our last number. And that's how that would work out. In the coding, in the implement portion, I'll go ahead and put that out there. So in the meantime, for the implement, I'm going to put it down as a function. So start off, we're going to do def, we're going to call it rotate array. And then our rotate array is going to take in 2 parameters for this one. We're going to call it array and k. Alright, now that we have that, 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to actually go through the for loop of it. So we would say for I in, you know what? Let's say for x, because then it capitalizes. So for x in range. So of course we want to have the inclusive part of 0. And then, like I mentioned in the part above, or plan from 0 to k, k. For I from range to k, so that takes care of that part. Now let's actually declare a temp number. So temp underscore num, and that's going to equal to the last element popped. So how are we going to get the last element? We're going to go array.pop, and inside of our pop method, we're taking the length of the array -1 is how we're going to do that. So let me actually just do this instead right here. So copy that. And then paste it here. Boom. We got our last number in our array. So next, now that we have, not only did we get rid of the number from the list, we also have it captured in our temp number. But we need to insert it back in. And the way we're doing that is we're going to go array.insert, and then we're going to go ahead and put in our 2 parameters. Our parameter is going to be the index where we want it. We want it at the first index, so that's going to be 0. And what exactly do we want in there is going to be our temp underscore number, num. And then once that's finished looping, actually let's fix the index a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then once that's fixed, once that's finished with the whole looping and whole fixing of rotating the array, then we're going to go ahead and return the array, lowercase array. And that is going to be how our code's going to go. So reviewing this all real quick, going from our planning, we're going to go ahead and reference up and down planning. So we take our inputs are going to be inside I'm going to take the parameters from rotate array, and then we're going to loop through 0 to k, which is what we're doing here, for x in range 0 to k. And then the one thing we want to do is we want to get the last element by popping it, and that's what we did here. We have array.pop is going to be the length of the array -1, so we're not out of bounds, and we're also capturing that in a variable. Now this part, why don't we have a variable for this one? The array method doesn't necessarily need, the insert method doesn't need a, we don't need to declare it as a variable. Since it's a method, we just do it. if that makes sense. And how we're doing this is we're going to go ahead and insert the element in the first index. So we have our array that we want. That's what we're looking for. We're inserting at the 0 index this number. And then we're doing that over and over and over and over until we're down to the return array. And that's it. That's all we're doing. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video helped.